Imagine this. It's an oppressively hot July morning in 1518, and you're wandering through the old cobblestone streets of Strasbourg, a thriving city in the Holy Roman Empire. Merchants are busily arranging their stalls, children play in sunlit squares, and life seems perfectly normal. But then you turn a corner and see something that will haunt your imagination forever. A woman is dancing wildly in the middle of the street, not out of joy, but gripped by a strange and unstoppable terror. Her shoes are soaked with blood from her battered feet. Her dress clings to her body, drenched in sweat. Her eyes hold the kind of panic that belongs to someone who simply cannot stop moving, no matter how desperately she longs to. Her name is Frau Trophäa, and she is about to ignite one of the strangest outbreaks of mass hysteria in all of history. What began as one woman's bizarre affliction would soon overwhelm hundreds, plunging medieval Europe into a plague not of disease, but of exhaustion, heart failure, and the haunting, inexplicable inability to stop dancing. This is the true story of the dancing plague of 1518, a mystery so unnerving that even modern science still fails to fully explain it, and so unsettling it exposes the shadowy corners of human psychology and society. Before we plunge into these forgotten tales of survival and suffering, if you like exploring the untold truths of history, tap that like button and subscribe for more stories like this. And let me know in the comments where in the world you're listening from. It amazes me that we're connecting across centuries, unraveling these old mysteries together from every corner of the globe. Frau Trophäa emerged into the narrow street outside her house on July 14th, 1518, and started to dance. But calling it dancing hardly does justice to what followed. It was something much stranger, violent, frenzied convulsions that seemed to seize her entire being. Witnesses described her movements as wild and erratic, as if she were a puppet being yanked about by invisible strings. Her arms jerked in every direction. Her legs thumped the stones so hard that the pavement chipped beneath her. The most disturbing part? She simply couldn't stop. For hour after hour, Frau Trophäa was trapped in relentless motion. When concerned neighbors tried to intervene, she pushed them away, twisting and writhing. When they offered her water, she tried to drink without stopping, spilling most down her chin and dress. As the summer sun climbed higher, the street grew unbearable, and her suffering only deepened. Sweat streamed down her, soaking her clothes and forming dark pools on the cobbles. Her breathing grew harsh, but still she couldn't halt the compulsive movement. The most terrifying thing witnesses noted: Frau Trophäa was desperately trying to stop. Her face radiated terror and exhaustion. Sometimes she cried out in German, pleading for help, begging God to make it end. But her body ignored her. She had become a prisoner inside herself, forced to watch as her limbs thrashed without purpose or mercy. By nightfall, a crowd had gathered. Some whispered that she was possessed by evil spirits. Others blamed a witch's curse. A few suggested she had eaten bread tainted with hallucinogenic mold. Yet no one could explain why she could not stop dancing. When night fell, lamps and torches were lit, illuminating her torment. Concerned locals took shifts watching over her, bringing blankets for the moments she shivered but kept moving, offering food she couldn't eat, and praying for her soul as she twisted in apparent agony. What happened next strains all reason, entering the realm of psychological horror. On the second day of Frau Trophäa's ordeal, a neighbor called Klaus began feeling a powerful urge to move. At first, it was just his legs twitching, a restless energy that made it impossible to sit still. But within hours, Klaus was dancing, as if against his own will. His movements were less wild than Frau Trophäa's, almost ballroom-like, but equally uncontrollable. He spun with invisible partners, stepping in patterns that followed music only he could hear. The sight of two people dancing uncontrollably drew even bigger crowds. Vendors abandoned their stalls to watch. Priests hurried from the cathedral, convinced it was either a miracle or the work of Satan. But the true nightmare was just starting. By day 3, 6 more people had joined in. At week's end, over 30 residents of Strasbourg were caught up in this involuntary ballet. Each brought a unique style, some wild and violent, others swaying like Klaus, a few moving in stiff military marches or clapping along as if at a festival. But they all shared the same inability to stop and the same terror in their eyes. fully aware that they'd lost control of their bodies. How it spread was most disturbing of all. This wasn't random. People who watched the dancers for long periods were the most likely to be affected. Families who cared for the afflicted often found themselves pulled into the dance within days. The contagion seemed to travel by observation, as though simply witnessing this bizarre phenomenon somehow infected the mind. Dr. Johann Weyer, a physician who witnessed it all, wrote in his journal, "I have seen plagues of the body, but this is a plague of the mind, spreading from eye to brain to limb, turning rational men and women into slaves of motion they cannot resist." The city's reaction only made things worse. Confronted with an epidemic no one could explain, Strasbourg's leaders made a decision now seen as one of history's most catastrophic public health failures. After consulting doctors and priests, they concluded the dancers were sick because they couldn't dance properly. The cure? More dancing. Medieval medical theory claimed that afflicted people had overheated blood that could be cooled only through continuous movement. So the city hired professional musicians, built a stage in the main square, and paid healthy volunteers to dance with the sick. They even invited expert dancers from nearby towns to demonstrate the proper way to dance. But instead of curing anyone, the music seemed to supercharge the compulsion. Where before the afflicted had moved to their own strange rhythms, now they tried to match the relentless beat. Movements became more violent, more coordinated, more exhausting. Professional dancers brought in to help quickly became infected themselves. The stage meant to contain the outbreak instead drew ever larger crowds and more infections. As the music echoed through the city, people who hadn't even witnessed the original dancers began to succumb. Within days, the number of dancers exploded from 30 to more than 100. Strasbourg's central square became a living nightmare. Dozens trapped in uncontrollable motion, musicians afraid to stop playing, crowds risking infection by simply watching. Eyewitnesses described it as hell on earth, the stamping of 100 feet, frantic music, and the constant cries of pain echoing night and day. What started as a strange curiosity became a disaster. The human body simply isn't built for endless, uncontrolled movement. The first fatality struck on the 7th day. Frau Trofea collapsed mid-spin, never regaining consciousness. Her official cause of death was heart failure from exhaustion, but witnesses described something more chilling. She danced herself to death, limbs still twitching long after she'd stopped breathing, and she was just the beginning. Medical records from Strasbourg describe death after death: heart failure, stroke, dehydration, starvation, and something they called exhaustion of the soul. Some dancers simply gave up. Their eyes went blank, faces drained of all expression, and they kept moving until their bodies shut down like broken machines. They couldn't eat, unable to stay still for a meal. They couldn't sleep, the urge to move overwhelming them, even in delirium. Drinking was near impossible, choking on water as they tried. Dr. Paracelsus, a famous physician, described feet worn to bloody stumps, joints dislocated, muscles wasting away from the inside. Some dancers developed what he called the dance fever, with body temperatures so high they became delirious, hallucinating and thrashing even more wildly. By the end of July, dozens were dead and hundreds more sick, with no end in sight. The city was running out of caretakers, the economy grinding to a halt as terrified people fled. Theories and speculation abounded: demonic possession, witches, cursed bread, melancholy, or strange cosmic events like a bright comet seen that summer. Modern science offers disturbing possibilities too. The leading theory is mass psychogenic illness, a kind of psychological epidemic triggered by extreme stress. Strasbourg in 1518 was battered by famine, disease, and unrest, conditions ripe for a collective mental breakdown. Most of the afflicted came from poor neighborhoods and had suffered recent loss or hardship. Some researchers have suggested it was a neurological illness, perhaps an early outbreak of sleeping sickness or conversion disorder, where trauma causes physical symptoms. Maybe most unsettling of all, the dancing plague was a case of social contagion, an idea spreading so powerfully that it becomes physically real. The end, when it came, was as strange as the rest. The city abandoned all previous strategies and organized a mass pilgrimage to the shrine of St. Vitus, patron of dancers and neurological ailments. More than 400 afflicted people were transported in carts or on foot, escorted by family, priests, and doctors. Contemporary accounts say that at the shrine, as each dancer was blessed, their movements gradually faded and stopped. Not suddenly, but over hours the compulsion was finally exhausted. By August 4th, only a handful were still afflicted. By morning, the plague was over. The aftermath was nearly as surreal as the event itself. Hundreds who had danced without rest for weeks were suddenly free, but changed forever. Many suffered what we now call PTSD, nightmares, deep depression, and a terror of music or rhythm. Some never recovered the ability to walk normally. Physical injuries lingered, joint damage, muscle wasting, heart problems. Even more lasting were the psychological scars. Survivors often said they felt like passengers in their own bodies, unable to trust themselves or regain their old lives. Strasbourg itself was left traumatized. For years, public dancing was banned except at religious festivals. Street musicians needed permits and could be arrested if their music was too lively. The dancing stage was burned, the square consecrated to keep evil at bay. The economic and social cost was devastating. Nearly 15% of the city's adult population was dead, disabled, or had fled. It took over a decade for Strasbourg to recover, yet the legacy persisted. News of the dancing plague spread through Europe, sparking fear and fascination. Other cities reported smaller outbreaks for years afterward. The event changed how people thought about crowds, health, and the mind-body connection. For the first time, authorities considered that psychological stress could trigger real physical illness, an idea that laid the groundwork for psychiatry. Modern echoes remain. The dancing plague might seem like a medieval oddity, but its lessons are timely. Consider viral social media challenges that drive people to risky or self-destructive acts. From ice bucket crazes to dangerous fads, the pattern repeats. An idea spreads, people join in despite the risks, and behavior becomes contagious. Modern outbreaks of mass hysteria still occur. Mysterious illnesses, conversion disorders, even mass fainting spells. In our ultra-connected digital age, ideas spread further and faster than ever. We might all be just one viral idea away from our own version of the dancing plague. The citizens of Strasbourg couldn't understand how a behavior could become contagious. They lived in a world where news traveled by word of mouth and horses, yet they experienced one of history's most chilling social epidemics. Today we have science, psychology, and instant communication, yet we remain vulnerable. Human consciousness is fragile and social. Under enough stress, entire communities can lose their grip on reality. The dancing plague reminds us that the line between individual and collective experience is perilously thin, and that social contagion remains as real and dangerous as ever. In the end, the dancing plague of 1518 is both a fascinating historical puzzle and a warning for the future. It shows us how delicate the boundaries of the mind can be, and how powerful collective belief and stress are in shaping our actions. Frau Trophea stepped into that street and began to dance because something inside her demanded it. Psychological trauma, illness, or something we may never truly understand. Her personal agony became a city's nightmare as the deeply human tendency to mirror and join swept through the population. The dancing finally ended at a holy shrine, but the conditions that set it in motion, stress, uncertainty, desperation still exist. We are all potential dancers, and the next contagion may already be brewing somewhere, waiting for the right spark. The rhythm may change, viral challenges, political panic, mass delusions, but the underlying mechanism is the same. The people of Strasbourg learned the hard way that ideas can be infectious, that consciousness is vulnerable, and that social experience can spiral out of control without warning. They paid in fear, sweat, and blood. The question for us is, will we recognize the signs before we too find ourselves swept up in a dance we cannot stop? 5 centuries later, the mystery remains. With all our science and progress, the strange epidemic of 1518 is still not fully explained. This suggests there are still deep, hidden forces in our collective mind. Forces that can overtake us in ways that are as mysterious as they are frightening. The dancers of Strasbourg are long gone, but their story remains echoing through history as a reminder that we are social beings, bound together by invisible threads. Somewhere under pressure, in a world that sometimes seems overwhelming, the next wild dance may already be beginning. As the days and weeks passed, the consequences of the dancing plague rippled through every layer of Strasbourg society. The citizens who had witnessed the outbreak, some drawn into the madness, others haunted only as observers, found their lives irreversibly changed. The memory of Frau Trophäa and the scores of other afflicted dancers lingered like a shadow in every corner of the city. Streets once alive with commerce and song now echoed with whispers of fear and wonder. And the townspeople took caution even with everyday joys, hesitant to gather in large crowds or celebrate with music, just in case the curse might return. Medical and religious authorities continued to debate the true cause of the phenomenon. Was it truly a supernatural affliction, or a profound psychosomatic event triggered by collective anxiety and suffering? In the aftermath, scholars from distant cities traveled to Strasbourg to investigate, filling journals and letters with their own interpretations and speculations. The city became a focal point for those fascinated by mysteries of the mind and spirit, and its name would be forever entwined with the legend of the relentless dancers. But what of the survivors? Many who had succumbed to the feverish compulsion would never fully recover. There are accounts of former dancers who lived with lifelong injuries, limps, twisted joints, chronic pain, and exhaustion that never left them. More deeply, a kind of psychological scar haunted them, a fear of losing control that colored their days and nights. Some avoided music or even rhythmic sounds for the rest of their lives, terrified that a simple melody might be enough to awaken the same uncontrollable force. The city itself underwent a transformation. Public festivals were banned for several years. Religious authorities performed rituals to cleanse the central square where so many feet had bled. Musicians required permits, and citizens became more superstitious about the power of crowds and suggestion. It took nearly a decade for Strasbourg's vibrant culture to return to what it had been before the summer of 1518. Yet the story did not remain only in Strasbourg. News of the dancing plague spread across Europe, inspiring both fear and curiosity. There were sporadic reports of similar outbreaks in other regions, but none so severe or dramatic as that fateful summer. Historians and writers began to record the tale, passing it down through generations as both a warning and a mystery, a reminder that sometimes the line between body and mind can blur in ways science cannot fully unravel. Even centuries later, the lessons of the dancing plague feel eerily relevant. Our modern world, too, faces moments of mass panic, psychological contagion, and events that seem to defy logic. The mechanisms have changed. Now, ideas and fears spread through media, social networks, and rapid communication. But the core vulnerability of the human mind remains. Crowd psychology, stress, and suggestion can still push communities into patterns of behavior that, in hindsight, appear baffling or terrifying. The story of Frau Trophäa and the dancers of Strasbourg is a testament to both the fragility and the resilience of the human spirit. It is a reminder that sometimes all it takes is a single spark, a woman stepping into the street, overcome by forces she cannot control, to ignite a fire that sweeps through a city and echoes through history. As we look back from the vantage point of modern science and medicine, we may feel confident that such an event could never happen again. But the lessons of 1518 linger, quietly cautioning us. The mind is powerful, collective fear can be contagious, and the past is never as far away as it seems. So when you next hear an unusual tale or witness something inexplicable spreading from person to person, whether it's an online craze, sudden panic, or a mass event, remember the streets of Strasbourg and the relentless dance that still haunts the shadowy corners of our imagination.